we all have intuition. We are an intuitive species. We are a psychic species. It's how we can communicate with one another beyond words and gestures. Right? It's the feeling that we pick up from somebody or that we put out to somebody else. But trusting that is not always easy if we have trust issues in the first place. The tools of divination are really easy to work with. And those were things like the runestones, the oracle cards, tarot, crystals, a pendulum. These are the tools that they take you slightly outside of yourself so that your self-doubt that might show up when it's just you coming up with the solution or the answer or the knowing and trusting it that it's valid. These tools give you that validation.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Ask Julie Ryan Show. It's where we blend spirituality and practicality to help you live a life of purpose and joy. We have Megan Edge on the show with us today. Megan combines energy healing, plant medicine, past life regression, and intuitive counseling to help her clients. And you know I'm going to have a bunch of questions about her healing modalities and techniques. Please remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share this episode with your family and friends. Now let's go talk with Megan. Megan, welcome to the show. I'm so thrilled that you could join us today. Thanks for making the time for us.
Oh, thank you so much for the invitation. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. Have you always been interested in helping others?
Yes. Since as far back as I can remember, I was the little girl who saved bugs from having their wings torn off. I was the little girl who picked up the worms after the rainstorm and put them back on the soggy grass, not realizing that they were trying to get away from the soggy grass. And I was the one on the schoolyard getting in the way of the bullies when they were trying to pick on, someone who wasn't their own size. It's always been how I am. If I see something that I can help with, I want to help. And that's not always well received, I'll say, but that's always my intention.
Are you still doing it now as an adult as well?
I'm still picking worms up off the
Bugs
street.
and the
Yeah.
worm.
And I'm still getting in the way of the bullies.
Oh gosh, it's so funny you're saying that. I'm laughing because I pick up bugs and release them, like, especially if they're in the house. And my husband and my son are like, "What are you doing? Just step on it." And I said, "Well, it's not a bug's fault that we're in its territory." So my husband, as a joke, got me this thing called a bug zooka. You ever heard of that? It's great. Do you
Yeah.
know what I'm talking about? It's like this long tube, and it's got a accordion compression thing. Then you put the tube over the bug, and then you click this button, and it sucks the bug up into the tube, and it has this thing that you unscrew, so then I'll take it outside, and I'll release it, and I'm talking to him the whole time. "It's okay, buddy. I'm gonna let you out, I promise." And it's been cold here in Sweet Home, Alabama, the last few days. There was a big old spider that I saw in my bathroom. And I said, "Okay, buddy, I'm gonna help you." And then I thought he'd probably rather stay inside than go back outside in the cold. But Bugzooka, I'm telling you, it's great. Oh gosh.
Yeah, we do it in our house all the time too. If there's a spider that needs to go outside or a pill bug or whatever it is. And like why step on them? Why do that? They have a purpose. They're a part of the ecosystem. They're a part of our environment. They've got a little point of consciousness.
Exactly. You call yourself a holistic healer. What does that title mean to you?
Holistic for me is seeing everything from the whole perspective. So allowing yourself to see from see the bigger picture from the bigger perspective. What I see people get really good at doing is micro focusing on the tiny little minutia of whatever the immediate thing is in front of them and reacting to that, as opposed to stepping back from their circumstances or the situation or the experience that they're having and asking, what is this? What is the bigger meaning of this? Where are the dots that I can connect that will help me appreciate why this is showing up in my life? So there's that piece of it. And then the other piece of it is all the different healing modalities and tools that I've learned over the years and that I bring in to my client sessions and their healing journeys creates a holistic practice. So it's really that creating a space that's full of all sorts of wonderful things that we can work with.
Why do you think our current allopathic medical world has been so siloed? You got the cardiologists and the gynecologists and neurologists and all of that. And it's like, you guys, you're forgetting that the body is a whole system instead of just that one part. And is that to what you're referring when you say that, kind of like you got a headache, instead of just treating the headache? It's like, what's causing the headache?
Absolutely. It's looking for the source, and first of all, it's expecting and knowing that there is a source at an emotional or, um, I was going to say environmental level, energetic level, an emotional and an energetic level. The symptom is coming from somewhere, and you could say, "I stubbed my toe, therefore the symptom is coming from the fact that I just stubbed my toe." And I would invite you to consider why you stubbed your toe. Right? I would take it to that level. But when you talk about allopathic medicine, it has become so compartmentalized, like you're describing, that the elbow doctor never talks to the knee doctor, who definitely doesn't talk to the ear doctor. And none of them go to the same conferences. None of them read the same literature. And their their training is in that one piece, that one mechanical piece of the body, instead of the holistic approach to the body, which is that we are a system. And in any system, everything responds to everything else. So the stubbed toe might make me feel really angry. And then I would wonder, well, wait a minute, why am I getting so angry? Well, maybe I need to stop for a moment, right? Maybe I need to take a pause in my day, and or maybe I need to look after my feet. Like they're just trying to get my attention by stubbing the toe. We can take the way that mainstream modern medicine has compartmentalized everything, and we can open up the doors between all of those compartments and begin once again to see the whole body as an entire system. And that when we heal one part of the body, we're really healing the whole system.
Why do you think it has been segmented like that? What do you think's where did that come from? Why do they do that?
Well, um, if we look at the history of the modern medical model in the United States, it becomes very apparent quite quickly how medicine became hijacked by pharmaceutical approaches to healing and wellness. And there's a lot of money that is a part of that system. So it's not actually in the pharmaceutical industry's interest to have a holistic approach to healing when they can create a medication or a surgery for the elbow that's different from the one for the stub toe or different the one for the ear. And I'm not saying anything new. This is, it's well, I believe it's well understood that the pharmaceutical industry is a profit-driven industry. And anytime you have that happening, you're going to you're going to you're going to have a conflict of interest between what we would want, how we would want to feel as being well, and then what we are taught to expect about health and wellness and how to solve problems or deal with symptoms.
Which is interesting because so much of the pharmaceuticals come from the old-fashioned apothecaries, which came from the herbalists, which came from the healers that were in every village and every culture all across the planet. And I find that fascinating too, that how so much of it you can see the progression of where it was. And does it in fact correlate between, okay, you can take this prescription medicine for this symptom, but maybe there's a correlating natural or holistic or herbal remedy that preceded it and works as well, if not better, without any side effects. Is that what you're finding in your practice as well? Are you able, I guess my question is, are you able to get your clients off of medication by switching them to something that's more holistic that ends up healing instead of just treating the symptoms?
Yes. Yes, that has been my experience with clients who've come to me, let's say they've been on antidepressants for the last 20 years. But it isn't just about taking the medication out of their system, which in and of itself is a process that needs to be done carefully and under supervision, because a lot of these medications are very addictive, and the body will go into shock if it's removed cold turkey. So there is a sort of phasing out that needs to happen. It's more than that with the work that I do, Julie, because what I'm looking at is the story that has created the symptom in the first place. And so there's an education piece when I work with my clients in my demonstrating to them the value of doing the healing at that emotional and energetic level, so that the need for the medication no longer exists because the symptoms have been treated through the therapeutic process, the story therapy. Um, and it's a very different way of looking at healing than what we are generally brought up with. And what I see from it, from this approach, is deep, permanent healing. And so it's not to say that the event that we might uncover that explains why a person's shoulder is frozen um, isn't still in their story. Of course it is, because it's something that has happened to them. But their relationship with the events that created the symptom in the first place, that's what's changed. That's what's healed. And so it's like I say, it's less about taking the medicine away, taking the pharmaceutical medicine away and replacing it with something holistic or herbal. It's really a completely different perspective. And it's that big picture that I was talking about at the beginning that helps the person see, oh, there's this dot. And because of this dot, this happened, and then this happened, and then that happened, and that belief showed up. And oh my gosh, I feel like I'm carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. Bingo, there's the belief. Now let's work on the belief so that the pain doesn't have to be there any longer. And what the pain is, what the symptom is your body trying to get your attention because there's something in that story that you can heal.
Mhm. Could you give us an example of a client perhaps that came in and presented with some symptoms, and then what were you able to uncover, and then what was the result of that?
There's so many. I'm trying to think of something specific. Well, okay, let's look at shoulder. I do get a lot of clients that have shoulder pain. I think a lot of people are walking around in this world with pain on their shoulders. When I had a client who had chronic shoulder pain, in fact, she'd had surgery to try to heal the frozen shoulder because nothing else was working. Cortisone shots weren't working, physiotherapy wasn't working. The opioids that she had been given to help with the pain, they were no longer working. And she came in all kind of hunched up on the side that her shoulder was frozen on. And rather than starting with, okay, you have a sore shoulder, I started with, what does it mean to you that you have a sore shoulder? Let's look at some of the verbiage that you use when you describe your sore shoulder, or some of the things that you might be saying as you go through your day. No one's got my back. I'm carrying the weight of the world on my shoulder. We then looked at the right side to the left side of the body, because in energetic medicine, we understand, or the belief is that the left side is the feminine side, the right side is the masculine side. So for her, it was on her right side. So we started exploring her relationship with men in her life. We started exploring her relationship with her father as the primary male relationship in her life. And then her own experience of herself as a strong woman, right? Because we have aspects of masculine and feminine in our energetic systems, and we've assigned the meaning to them, but really that's just actually another compartmentalization. But for the purposes of the conversation, we went all the way back into her childhood to her primary relationship with her father. And that's where we started to unravel this belief that she had that men were her responsibility. It was her responsibility to look after men and make sure that they were okay. Not an uncommon, belief that we have in our society that women and men have about women's roles. But for her, it was very specific to an incident where something had happened, I think, in the kitchen as a little tiny girl, and her father screamed at her that she wasn't doing a good enough job for whatever it was. And that moment, when we captured that moment, and she broke down in tears, and her whole body was trembling as the shock of that experience when she was 3 years old started to leave her adult body, her shoulder started to drop. And over the course of another few sessions doing energy work plus the therapeutic counseling work that we do, her shoulder dropped completely to the point where she no longer had shoulder pain.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah. Do you find that there's normally an emotional component in place before any kind of medical condition arises?
Every time.
Me too.
Yeah.
I agree. It's the most important part of a healing because we can fix body parts all day long. But if you're leaking power because you got emotional stuff going on, what's the point?
Yeah,
It's kind of
absolutely.
my feeling about it too. And it's fascinating to me too. And see if you, I'd love to hear your take on this, Megan. It's not necessarily the most dramatic or traumatic thing that's happened. And when I pinpoint usually a year, if it's in this lifetime, I was talking to a client earlier this afternoon and we were doing the emotional part of the healing after we did all the body parts. And I said, okay, 1982, where were you? What was going on? How old were you? They go right to it. Even if they don't remember it like since that time. It's fascinating how it's just instant. Like your friend or your client who went back to when she was 3. I bet she hadn't thought about that in probably decades, if in fact she even remembered it until you brought it up.
Well, that's just it, and she had a cellular memory of it, and she had a preverbal memory of it. I mean, yes, we do have language at 3, but we don't have the sophistication of language to be able to describe what that felt like and the depth of that emotional response to that kind of an experience. And certainly there had been many other experiences in the course of her life that had layered upon that one, but we didn't have to go into any of those if we were able to pull out the first one, the origin of it.
I do the same thing. You're the first other person I've ever talked to that does it this way. And I say, you don't need to relive all the drama and trauma because you get all of that energy removed in one fell swoop.
Yes,
And it's just, it's amazing how well it works.
it is
To
phenomenal,
when you
phenomenal.
go for the root, I say there's always room for psychotherapy, and the psychotherapists say, "Okay, we're gonna talk about your life, and it's gonna be like we're peeling an onion a layer at a time." And I say, "I just wanna get the damn onion out by the root. Why do you wanna go through all that drama and trauma again?"
Well, that's just it, and very often, and you've probably experienced this as well, by the time a client finds us, they've already peeled that onion so many times, and I have clients come into my space and say, "Look, I don't wanna hear my own story anymore. I have said it so many times," and I say, "Okay, I understand that, but the fact that you've said it so many times and the healing hasn't happened means that we need to address your relationship with the story and the way in which you're telling the story and understanding its purpose in your life." And when we do that, the client moves from, "I'm a victim of my circumstances, and this is the story that I keep repeating and repeating and repeating," to, "Oh, you mean there's a reason for this happening? There's a purpose? I can do something with it? I can make it meaningful in my life that this happened to me?" Yes, but let's look at the relationship that you have with the story, the language that you're using to describe it, how you are telling it to others, and then the energy around it. Right? So when we talk about PTSD, for example, and mainstream medicine tells us that PTSD is a permanent psychological situation, and there is no
It's
healing
not.
from it. We just
That's
treat the
crazy.
symptoms of it.
It's crazy.
It is crazy. That's the biggest failing, I would say, of modern medicine is in giving people that kind of ultimatum and limiting their own belief about what is possible to heal. And PTSD is a trauma response to a shocking incident in one's life, something you were not expecting to have happen, or something that's so awful repeatedly that your body just goes into lockdown as a protective mechanism. But we can undo that damage to the point where a person can remember the circumstance, but not have it define their own experience of themselves or the way that they show up in the world. And it's more than just talk therapy. Again, it's that holistic approach, because there are things that happen to us that we don't have language for, even as adults. We're just too shocked by the experience. So that's when we bring in the energy healing. For me, I have an energy modality called intuitive energy massage that I created many years ago, and I certify people in this technique. And it's a combination of many, many different but similar energy healing and physical healing modalities. And through the course of a session, like a healing journey, we will have the story piece, but then we'll also have the physical healing piece where we move through the resistance that the body might be holding, and we move into the different layers that we have surrounding us. The emotional, the spiritual, the energetic, the belief systems, and we do that without words, because the words get in the way, and we let the body do what it knows best to do, which is to release the things that it doesn't need to be holding on to any longer.
Do you find that there are clients of yours that have traumas and traumas, for lack of a better word, that they bring in from past lives that you can clear?
Yes.
I do as well. Tell us about that.
Yes, absolutely. But I will say that when I'm working with a client, we work with this lifetime first, right? Because this lifetime has its own value, obviously, and it also has its own share of the traumas and dramas before we jump into another lifetime. And the reason that I do it that way, Julie, is because I don't want my client to get distracted by the work that's showing up in this lifetime with the stories of the other lifetime where it's coming from. Having said that, some I've experienced some amazing healings for my clients when we've exhausted the understanding of what's happened in this lifetime, and we open up the memories of the previous lifetime to look for that source again. Right? Because just as we can layer from my client who was 3 and then other experiences with men, layer on her shoulder, if there's something that she's brought in from another lifetime into this lifetime specifically, because this is the lifetime in which the healing can happen,
Mhm.
we're going to need to go there, right? And we're going to need to go down into that rabbit hole where we may learn that in a previous lifetime, actually, this is what I'm remembering it. So this was a while ago that this client came to me, but I'm remembering now. We went into those past lifetimes, and there was one where she was a soldier, Roman soldier, and a friend of hers betrayed her, and the javelin went through the back of her shoulder and out the front, and before she was killed. So again, it's the masculine, but this case, it was man to man, mano a mano, as opposed to a woman's experience of men. But it was that brotherly betrayal that required another level of healing in order to release that thread, like unravel that thread of that original source back in the previous lifetime.
And I'll see a semblance of a script that will repeat throughout multiple lifetimes. And we're looking at the same script from a different perspective, to your point about that javelin story. And then I always think to myself, you can make this stuff up. Because, right? Because sometimes you can corroborate the information you get with historic documents online. And I just think, okay, here we go. We
Absolutely.
get the names and the places and where they were and all of that. And back to, I believe it's the most important part of healing is what's the emotional component that's in place before the body manifests any kind of a symptom or medical condition. Let's back up for a second. You mentioned cellular memory. Tell us about that.
So our cells have consciousness. Have you ever read any of the Seth material?
I have not.
Okay, so Jane Roberts
Do
and
I
her
need
husband.
to?
I highly recommend it. It's recommended reading for all of my students.
All right.
The Seth material, when I stumbled
Who's
across it,
Seth?
Se
Who's Seth?
so Seth, by his own description, is, a non-corporeal personality who speaks through Jane Roberts. No, Jane Roberts has passed away since. She died in, I think it was 1983. But between 1964 and 1983, hoping those dates are they're accurate to within a few years, she she and this entity, Seth, worked with one another and wrote volumes and volumes and volumes of work. looking at the entire width and breadth of metaphysical healing, metaphysical understanding, other lifetimes, multi-dimensions, all time being simultaneous. These are just some of the things that they touch upon. And what I love about the Seth materials, first of all, it's very grounded. Um, I'm not a big fan of the flowery, oh, sweet angel kind of writing. I know some people love it. It's just not how I prefer to read and receive information. He's hysterical. He's just a really funny guy. Great perspective on what it is to be human because he's been human many times himself before. But the interesting piece about all of this, and one of the things that for me really lands in terms of the validity of the information that is shared through these volumes and volumes, is that um, Seth himself is not really concerned about don't drink, don't smoke, don't party to be a pure vessel for communication and information, for one thing. But also, when Seth showed up in Jane Roberts' life, she was trying to debunk ESP. She was doing a journalism article and was working with the Ouija board and a few other divination tools to prove that it's just a whole bunch of hocus pocus and none of it's real. And then what started happening is that these words were coming through her. Her whole personality would change when this person would speak through her on subjects that she had no knowing of prior to having these conversations. And for me, I felt that to me, um, it landed for me. It spoke to somebody who was in a healthy skeptical relationship with these kinds of experiences, and she maintained that all the way through to her death. When Jane Roberts first was starting to use the Ouija board, I think she only used it 3 or 4 times before the Seth personality said, "Look, this is really cumbersome. Like, I don't wanna be telling you these great secret or these great truths one letter at a time, so we're
Yeah,
gonna just need to put that aside, and you're
right.
going to need to invite me to speak through you because that's gonna be way better."
Well, and the Ouija board was the best-selling game in the history of games until The Exorcist used it in the movie, and
Right.
that's when it went to the devil, right? That's when it was associated with evil, which doesn't exist. All spirits are pure love. But
Mhm.
it I find that whole story fascinating with the
Yeah.
Ouija board. Oh, yeah, we had everybody I knew had one.
Yeah.
Growing up in the '60s and '70s, absolutely, and before that, I'm sure, the homes all had it. Well, and you look at back and we're down a rabbit hole, so we'll get back on we'll get back on task here in a second, but
I
it's a
love rabbit holes.
fascinating yeah, it's a fascinating, little tidbit of history, like the London Psychic Society and these these societies of mediums and psychics that are hundreds of years old, and all the gentrified, wealthy people in town belong to them and were participating. The London Psychic Society started, I think, in the late 1700s or early 1800s, perhaps even. I forget exactly. It's really old.
It speaks to our fascination with things that are beyond our initial viewing, right? I mean, there's so much going on beyond our sight or our senses, our 5 main senses, right? And people have known this forever, forever. This is why we have shamanism all the way back to 40,000, 75, 85,000 years ago. We have evidence of spiritual questing because we know at some deep level, or maybe it's a surface level for some of us, we know there's more to the world than just what is right in front of us. And that interest and that curiosity is why we have Ouija boards, tarot decks, oracle card decks. It's why we use pendulums. It's why we go and seek a psychic or go and seek a reader because we want to know that there's more to our lives and more to what's going on in the world, in the universe, than what is right in front of us. And the thing about the Ouija board or the tarot or rune stones or whatever else, these are tools. They're divination tools. You don't need them. You actually don't need them. However, there's nothing wrong with having them. They're part of sort of the toolkit of developing your intuition or just tapping into, other realms. And it's you who's doing the magic. if you want to think of it that way, or the woohoo. But really, it's very practical and very grounded in a shared human experience.
So I'm out of the rabbit hole. Let's go back to cellular memory. Okay, I've climbed my way out. Let's go back to the cellular memory thing piece. Tell us more about that.
Right. The reason we got off track was because so I learned through my studies of the Seth material about the consciousness in everything. And you and I were discussing before we got on, or no, sorry, we were talking about at the beginning about bugs. And why wouldn't you want to step? Why wouldn't you step on a bug? Because it has a point of consciousness.
What the fuck doesn't occur to me to step on it?
No, but for lots of people, it doesn't occur to them not to. Oh, just whack it, right? But you've done a disservice to consciousness, and I mean, you can't help occasionally stepping on bugs. They're everywhere. And if there's a mosquito flying around me, I will smack the mosquito. I'll be perfectly honest. There's certain things that I don't want it to be biting me. So, um, but that consciousness is in every living thing, and cells are living. They have memory. And we know this from a metaphysical place, but we also know this from a scientific place. We have research that supports the idea that cells remember. When we look at past lives, going back to that rabbit hole, how is it that we can remember what happened in a different lifetime when this body is brand new? This body has never lived before. But the cells have consciousness, they have memory. So when this body is born, there's a connection at the cellular level to experiences that the soul has had in each of the bodies that it has chosen to live in its various lifetimes. And our cellular memory is also from this lifetime. So when you burn yourself, the first time you ever get a burn from a lighter or a match or a candle, your skin will heal, the cells will heal, but you will remember what that felt like because your cells have a memory of that pain. That's how you remember it. That's how we remember physically.
You're saying it's not a brain memory, it's a cellular memory.
It's a cellular memory.
Huh.
But
I
the
never
cells,
thought of it that way.
if we postulate that the cells have consciousness, I mean, they don't have a brain the way that we have a gray mass in the top of our heads. And Seth would say that in fact, memory is not held in the brain. Memory is held in the body. The body is memory. The body is wisdom. The brain is synapsis. It's the physical entity that holds the capacity of the body to remember and experience and see forward. Like to know, wait, if I put a candle up to my hand again, it's going to hurt, right? So that forward thinking is part of the complex system of what is our memory through cellular memory, through soul memory, energetic memory, and then you could even say environmental memory, right? If you go to the fields of Culloden where the massive battle happened between the Scottish and the English, if you're sensitive to the environment, you'll feel that, right? That's being remembered by the landscape because everything has consciousness.
Back to the cells having soul memory. What's your take on when does that memory get injected into the cells? Is it when somebody is conceived and then the spirit joins into those cells and brings along with it the memory of all those past lives and the soul memory? What's the mechanism to get, or do we even know, to get that soul memory into our cells in this lifetime? And furthermore, there are many people that believe that we live multiple lifetimes concurrently. So does that happen in all of our lifetimes simultaneously? Easy questions here.
Yes,
I'm
yes, yes, and yes.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Uh, we're getting into some deeper territory, which is awesome. I love these kinds of questionings. The if we are to believe that all time is simultaneous, and we can go into quantum physics and we can read the studies and understanding about quarks and all the other things that are happening in quantum physics. What quantum physics is demonstrating to us is that linear time as we most commonly experience it is not the only way in which time is experienced, that time can loop. Einstein knew this as well. So these theories, these very heady theories about how we experience time bring us to that understanding that everything is happening everywhere at the same time. I think there was a movie recently that came out with that sort of a similar title. Um, and that our consciousness chooses points of focus that allow us to have what seems like a linear experience. So, as to the question, well, when does it all come in? When does the body remember at the cellular level the things that it needs to remember for this lifetime's goals? It's happening all the time. I don't think there's any one point. I mean, if we're looking at linear time, we could say, well, it's that moment that the soul has finished writing the story for the experiences that it wishes to have the next time it incarnates in a physical form. The memories that it wants to bring into each lifetime will be specific to what those goals are. But I believe that it isn't a single point. Because if all time is simultaneous, then that means that the moment that something shows up in my lifetime that I hadn't anticipated happening, I can tune into a whole bunch of memories from other lifetimes if I've had an experience that's similar to that, that will then allow me to navigate what seems like a new experience in this lifetime, but is in fact something that other aspects of myself in different lifetimes, future, past, and concurrent, already have the experience of. So um, it becomes a shared experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm kind of feeling like Scooby-Doo, where Scooby-Doo goes, "Huh? What?" Well, all right, let's dissect this a little further to help my Scooby-Doo brain here. When you say that the memories are in the cells even before the person's conceived, because things are happening simultaneously. So in this lifetime, we're not conceived yet, but in other realities, we have been conceived and our cells are already operating with all those memories, even if it's like I'm a pirate, off the coast of Cuba in the 1700s and I'm looking for gold. Those cellular memories from those lifetimes and lifetimes in between my pirate lifetime and the lifetime that I'm living now haven't occurred yet. Time doesn't exist in the spirit world is what I always say. So we always think that it has to do with past occurrences. And in fact, it has to do with all occurrences because the past and the future are not limited by linear time. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes. Yes. So think of it this way. When we conceive of past lives, even just look at the words past lives. So we're assuming that these are experiences that we've had in a linear past, present, and future as we understand it. And most people think or believe that it's sequential. So let's say your first lifetime was in the 3rd century BC. Your next one will be 500 AD, and then the next one might be 1300, and then so on until you get to now, 1920 or 1924. I was around in 1924, in a different lifetime. 2025.
I was gonna say, you look really good for being around in 1924. Yeah. You'd be 100.
Uh, so we have this idea, and then within that concept is the idea that we learn from each lifetime, and so we grow our knowledge base from lifetime to lifetime. When we are discussing the concept of all time being simultaneous, and we add to that an understanding that the soul is looking for experiences, right? That means that you could have a conscious memory, a focused memory of 3 BC being your first lifetime as a human being, but your next one might be 3025. And then the one after that might be 1986. And then there could be another one right now in 2025, including you as you recognize yourself, but another aspect of you who's living concurrently with you. Now, the question might come up, well, why? Why would we be jumping all over the place? Well, because each lifetime offers us a unique perspective on the human experience based on the timing, the evolution of the culture that we're in, the different family dynamics and origins that we bring into that lifetime. And so there may be something that my soul is only going to have the opportunity to experience in the year 3025 or whatever year I said, that in no other time in our understanding of the human experience will I be able to have that experience. But it's the next thing my soul wants to learn how to do or wants to know or heal something from 3 AD that can only be healed in 3000, right? So there'll be that, it's like a leapfrogging between lifetimes. And then the question might come up is, well, then what do we do with all this information? Where do we go with it? That's why we dream. When we dream, we have the opportunity to connect to all these other aspects of our soul self in all the different places that they are in and all the different times that they are in, whether that's corporeal or non-corporeal, and share that experience and that information with all aspects of our soul.
Which begs the question, where does free will come in?
Hmm. We have so much free will because we're constantly calling to ourselves opportunities to express our core creativity, our core essence, our core energy. And in order to do that, we have to have choice. And because we have choice, we have free will. The moment that you get to decide between one or more courses of actions or things to eat or clothes to wear in the morning or directions to take when you walk out your door, you're expressing free will. And that's the creative spark that allows our universe to be so multifaceted and so amazing, and for us to have so many different kinds of experiences, whether they're completely mundane and muggle, seemingly, or they're just blow your mind with their metaphysicalness.
I love that, muggles. So that begs the question. You got my brain percolating here today, girl. That begs the question of, if we come in with things that we want to explore and experience, most people believe that it's a script that we follow. And I have people ask me all the time, as I'm sure you do as well, well, what's my purpose in this life? And I say, to create and share love, period.
Hmm.
And then the free will is, what do you want to create? It doesn't matter. And so if we are existing in multiple realities simultaneously, is there normally a semblance of that script that we're exploring simultaneously? Or do we do scripts and then we say to ourselves, okay, got that. Let's switch to a villain role. Let's say we were in the princess role, and now we're going to turn into the villainous role.
Right.
What's your understanding of how that works?
Well, I do love the idea, the concept that we write a story for each lifetime. Rather than script, I love the word theme. What is the theme of your lifetime? What is the theme that you might be carrying through multiple lifetimes?
What's the difference between a script and a theme?
Well, the theme is the subject, right? The theme might be that I always want to be a helpful person. That's my theme, is to be a helper. How do I want to experience being a helper in a myriad of different ways, including some that may not be considered the good guy, right? Um, so how can I bring that theme through each lifetime? And I could write a story and I can create all the characters, and the characters and I will work together. This is the sort of the visualization that I have of what it's like. Like, think of a corporate boardroom, or maybe it's someone's living room with a big round sofa. And you as your soul self and all of the key players keeping in mind that they also have their boardrooms that they're doing this in at the same time simultaneously. Um, we sit down, and if I'm the center of attention, I say, okay, right. So the last dozen lifetimes, this, and this has happened, and I responded this way, and this way. This lifetime, I'd like to write in that one of the themes I'm going to struggle with as a helper is a sense that I'm not good enough. I can't do enough to save the world. I want to have a save the world complex in this lifetime because I haven't had that before. So 2025 at the age of 56 is the perfect place and time to see the chaos in the world and test the theme of how am I going to respond to what from the outside looking in is an overwhelming number of opportunities to go into save the world complex. What am I going to do with that? Right. So now we've written kind of a story. We've said these are some of the things that I'd like to experience in this lifetime. Here are some of the things I want to heal from previous experiences at the human level, right? Because here's the thing, and this is a little bit of an aside. I realize the topic is so vast. We bring into each lifetime those things that we can only heal in the physical human form. We cannot heal them in the spirit form because they are generated in the human physical form. And that includes energy and emotion.
Can you give us an example of
Yeah.
that?
Yes. So let's say in a previous lifetime, well, let's say I'm going to pull up one of my previous lifetimes. Um, and then my mind goes blank. Come on. There's so many of them. Oh, I know the one where I was burned at the stake. Lots of us have that one. Okay, so persecuted. I was the healer of the village. The Inquisition
Where were
shows up.
you? Were you in Europe?
I was in Europe. Yeah. The Inquisition shows up. I've got a really natty neighbor who's jealous of the fact that I have all these herbalistic skills. She rats me out to the Inquisition. I'm hauled off, and I go through that whole process. And it's horrific. And at the physical level, we're talking back to cellular memory. My cells, when I come back into human form, will remember what that traumatic experience was of being tortured and burned at the stake. When I died on the stake, when my soul left my body, I was not in pain. I had a vast understanding of all of the players and all of the things that I called into that life and the reasons why, because once I'm non-corporeal, I can see so much more of those connections, right? But what I can't do at the non-corporeal realm is heal the physical trauma and the emotional trauma that was generated by the physical trauma in the spirit form. It's one of the reasons why we choose to come back into human form is to resolve and heal those experiences that we called to us in that other lifetime that could best be healed in another particular time. So for me, this lifetime, my pursuit of natural healing methods, my pursuit of understanding spirituality and metaphysics and otherworldly and all of that brought me to a place, and studying past lives, all of that brought me to a place where I was able to remember that traumatic life experience, feel it again in my body, but know that it wasn't happening right now. It wasn't happening to this body. And I could reach back through time and I could be there for the me that experienced that with the healing tools that I have in this lifetime, that I learned in this lifetime, that were different than the ones I learned then, and do that deep healing work at this level so that it isn't something that needs to be healed again.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. All right, let's pivot for a second here. Was there a catalyst that prompted you to become a holistic healer? I mean, what did you want to be when you grew up? When you were a kid, did you study a certain curriculum when you were in school? What's your journey been like that's gotten you to this place?
I would love it if there had been something in school that was part of this. I mean, that was taught as part of the curriculum. Certainly, my schooling was very different than what young people are learning today. I don't know about you. Well, I do know about the US, but in Canada, the curriculum has changed dramatically. And there's a lot of things that I got to learn that my children didn't get to learn.
Such
But
as?
such as history, such as geography, geology, debate, religions, all those sorts of things are not taught in an equal manner now as they were when I was going through school.
What's the emphasis on now with your kids?
Well, they're both out of high school now, but it's just a much more watered down version of events. And in terms of world history, there was virtually none. They learned Canadian history from about 1700 to now from a very narrow lens. No US history, except for when it involved Canada and the US. They didn't learn Chinese history or Egyptian history or, and they didn't even learn European history. So it's different. It's different. And so I think with what I did learn in school, the openness of education as it used to be was certainly helpful in the kinds of questions that I would ask about things that are happening in the world around me. But more than that, my education came from my family. I grew up in a very nature-based family. I mean, we lived in the city. Don't It's not that we were living out on the farm somewhere. That would have been lovely, but we weren't. We were living in downtown Montreal or downtown Vancouver, um, or Toronto. But we had access to the wild woods and the beaches and the oceans and the lakes. And I grew up with very curious parents who loved the idea of foraging and going out and picking berries and picking mushrooms and going fishing and clamming and oystering and all of that. So for me, it was perfectly normal to go out into nature and know what I could eat. And so already I was being exposed to more than it was right in front of most people.
Mhm.
My father was a journalist. My mother was very artistic and very creative. And she was always very tapped into what she called the fae. So that was my upbringing. My sort of non-formal education was with all of that curiosity. And because I grew up with that curiosity, I've always looked for answers beyond what was just given to me. The moment somebody says to me, "Well, it's just like this. This is the only way. This is it." I will immediately go and try to find a dozen other ways that it can happen or be done or or at least question the why of it. Well, why? Why is this the only way? Why is this working or why isn't this working? And that I was born with. I believe I brought that in to this lifetime. And then where it became focused in on healing and healing that is different than mainstream allopathic healing is in that desire to help and also bristling when told there is only one way.
So were you in a medical provider role before you went into the holistic healing?
Nope, not in a mainstream way. Well, okay, actually, that's not entirely true. In university, I was doing women's studies and social work, and my focus was to become a sexual therapist. I wanted to help people, especially women who had experienced sexual assault in their lives and were considered themselves to be victims of sexual assault. I wanted to change that. I wanted to change that language. I wanted to change that belief, and I wanted to help them with their experiences. So I did study social work. I worked on a crisis line. I did psychology. I did sociology. I had that intention to move into that realm. And at the time, the only way I knew how to do that was through university and through, mainstream studies. Um, and then I decided after working a year on a crisis line while I was still in university in my mid 20s that I was way too young to be doing this work. And I didn't know yet how to not be triggered myself from the experiences that I was a part of as a crisis counselor. So I had the wherewithal at that time to step back from all of that. And when I was doing the social work, the limits that we were being taught we would experience if we were out in the field as government social workers, that that realization of how little I would be able to do that really propelled me to look for something else, a different way that I could show up and be of service. And at the time, there weren't the kinds of courses and classes that there are now, the sorts of things that I teach or that lots of other people are now teaching. So I did a lot of self-study. I studied the Seth material for one thing. Anything that I could find at the alternative bookstore or in the alternative section of the library, the secondhand bookstores, I was pulling those out and I was reading everything that I could get my hands on to fill that void in education around natural healing, herbalism, spirituality, past lives, spirit guides, you name it.
Yeah.
You name it.
So you were working your social worker job and learning this other stuff on the by night. You were a social worker by day and learning woo-woo by night, it sounds like. When was there a catalyst that prompted you to take that leap from leaving the government role into doing something on your own, or perhaps you were working with somebody else at the beginning? Tell us about that.
Sure. Well, when I left university, I'd finished my women's studies degree and my social work degree, and I'd they said I'd been working on the crisis line for a while, but I'd stopped all of that, and in fact, I did a complete 180, and I started a second degree in geology, which I know doesn't sound like there's any connection,
Sure there is.
but there
Nature.
sure is. Yeah. No, well, for me, there is. There because I again, I grew up in this family that focused in on nature, and we used to watch documentaries about the natural world and all of that, so it was and I just loved the rocks, and I loved understanding the story, of the earth. When I left university, I packed everything up. My boyfriend and I at the time, we packed everything up that could fit into a car, and we drove across the country from Nova Scotia on the East Coast all the way out to Victoria on the West Coast, and got out here to my roots. This is where I'm from. This is where I grew up. This is where my family's from for 6, 7 generations. And the land here, it's so energetically different than the East Coast, and I could feel myself melting back into a sense of being home and of belonging. But at the time, in order to make money and to looking for careers and jobs now that I'd left the sort of that realm of healthcare, I started working for as a horticulturalist. I did some training. I got my horticultural certificate or certification, and I was helping people with their gardening, and I was helping them with their plants, and I was figuring out which plants I could eat while I'm in the greenhouse. And I'm curious about which plants might be medicinal and how I could use those plants to help people who were coming to me in the greenhouse with a cut finger or the sniffles or whatever it was that they were coming up with. And I ended up working for about 4 or 5 years as a horticulturist, as an entrepreneur horticulturist, had my own business helping people. And then from there, I switched over to banking, which again, you're like, "What?"
I was getting that there was banking and finance somewhere in that mix, so thank you
Yes.
for
Yeah.
validating that. I
Yeah.
must be psychic or something.
You must
Yeah,
be.
okay.
And not to we don't read the whole biography, but suffice it to say that each time I decided it's time to do something new and different, there's an area of life that I wanna learn more about, I will I will stop what I'm doing and I will head off in another direction. But in every instant, the directions always come back to one another in a spiral. So with the financing, I wanted to understand money, and I wanted to understand investment and math and all that, and numbers. Um, and I figured someone should pay me while I'm doing it. So that's what I started doing. And the people who were coming to me with their financial woes and their debt problems and their shame that they had around money and financing and what they weren't doing properly and what they could be doing differently. And I was counseling them. All right. I was in that therapeutic relationship once again and somehow downloading exactly what it was that they needed to hear to help them heal what was coming up for them around the shame around money. So there's a whole psychology around that. It's not exactly what the banks were wanting me to be doing because
Bet
they really
not.
wanted me to be selling debt products that would get people more in debt.
Right,
Banks are a business. That's how they make their money.
right.
Um, and then I had started having my babies. So I left the bank, and when I was home with my babies, again, having those experiences of people just walking up to me, random strangers, telling me their life story, and my knowing how to comfort them or what to say that would give them a perspective they'd never thought of before. A little light bulb went off in my head, and I thought, I could be getting paid to do this work. Wait a minute. I was a counselor. Wait, I was a crisis counselor. Oh my goodness, I have all this training. So how do I do it the way I want to do it? I want to do it from the metaphysical perspective. I want to do it from the spiritual perspective. I want to learn how to tap into a person's knowing that they've turned off to help them turn it back on again so that they can be happy in their lives and live their lives to the fulfillment that they wrote in that first story. The story that we're talking about earlier. Bring them back around to that meaning and purpose in their life, because I knew what it felt like to have fallen away from that purpose and meaning, and to then be able to bring myself back to it. And that was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And I haven't actually pivoted since then.
Well, and it's fascinating when we look at anybody, whether it's you or me or anybody, how all of our lives are on a trajectory. And if you look at it when they get to be my age and your age, we've lived enough of life that we can see, okay, that led to that, which looked like I was on a hiatus, but not necessarily, because that's what I experienced. And it's how it's benefiting me now in moving forward. I find that really fascinating. I love to hear people's stories about their lives because there's always you can always see a progression, even if it seems like we're falling backwards at times. There are so many rich lessons that are learned even during that time of crisis or of tragedy, perhaps that leads us forward. And oftentimes people will say, well, that's I would go through it again, even though it was atrocious going through it, but here's how I benefited from it. And the old saying, everything happens for you at times when we're being challenged that's a tough pill to swallow. And yet when we get some hindsight available to us, we can see how that happened. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, and it does take a certain amount of discipline, I believe, Julie, for us to look at our lives from that perspective. And it's the perspective that I hope that I can demonstrate to my clients and my students, is that there's a different way of looking at your life that could be more beneficial for you than the way you're currently looking at it. It's that relationship again with the story that we tell ourselves. And a question that I often will ask my clients is, if you had anything in your life to do over, to do differently, or to make a different decision, what would it be, or would you?
Yeah. And what's the normal answer, or is there? What give us percentages?
Sure, like, it's every once in a while, a person, maybe 5-10% of people will say, well, actually, yes, there was that time I wish I hadn't said that, or I wish I hadn't made that decision. I'll say, okay, so let's look at it from today, like from where you are today in your life. Let's go on a different happen track. Let's play with this for a little bit. If you hadn't said that, how do you think it would have changed? The eventual trajectory, the eventual outcome. And inevitably, 100% of the time, when we start to look at where that free will came in and they went this way instead of this way, they start to explore what would have happened if they went the other direction, they will come back to the same point.
They arrived through a circuitous route oftentimes, and I find that everybody experiences that. You want something, you get it, but you don't get it in the way that you think you're gonna get it. It takes you a different route. Let's change directions again. Tell us about your energy healing work that you do. You mentioned it earlier, and it sounds like it has massage as part of the healing equation. So tell us about that. And if somebody wants to work with you, do they need to work with you in person, or do you do remote sessions with people as well?
Well, I'll answer the second question first.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely, I can do remote sessions. I have clients all over the world, I'm sure you do as well,
Mhm.
because we know that energy isn't constrained by the limitations that we try to put on it.
Right.
It's not in a box. It can go anywhere at any time. And the energetic connection that we have with one another is it's not impacted by our concepts of linear time. So like right now, you and I are in very different parts of the world, but we're sharing an energy bubble. Right? We're in each other's energies, even though we're on other sides of the continent. So absolutely. And can it be as effective? Definitely it can. Do I love seeing my clients in person? Sure, I do. Of course I do. But not everybody can get to Victoria. it's a, it's a bit of a ways for some people to get to. Uh, the intuitive energy massage that I created, again, it was one of those times in my life where I was told there's only one way to do things. And I immediately hackles up, went, "Mm-mm, no, there's got to be more than one way." So I wanted to learn Reiki. I wanted to understand energy healing better. And I had been utilizing a process that I called white light healing. And that was just a word I came up with because when I would work with my hands, I would envision this beautiful white light, sparkly light, think like snow when the street lights are on it, that kind of thing, coming from my hands and going into the person that I was working on. But I knew that nobody had heard of white light healing before, and I knew that a lot of people had heard of Reiki. So I decided I would go and get my Reiki, and I did my level 1, my level 2, I got all the way up to master, and I did it in the Ususi style, which is and I don't think I'm pronouncing it correctly, right? But it's a very rigid at the time. You learned it this way. These are the hand positions. This is what you do, and these are the symbols. And that's what you work with. And if you deviate from that, you're not doing it right. And I think I managed to get to about 1.5 clients following exactly where my hands were supposed to go before my hands started to move. They started to go elsewhere, and they actually wanted to rest on the body, and they wanted to pull the body a little bit. Uh, and so I just went with it because that's generally what I do when things like that show up. And what I was noticing was how profound the healing sessions were for my clients. They were coming off the table just sobbing or telling me like they never have had visions like that before while they were being worked on. And
Mhm.
I was receiving information as well as I was working on them. And so because I wasn't trying to remember where to put my hands, I was allowing my intuition to flow, and I was opening up and connecting with their energy field and all the memories that are in that energy field, like that cellular memory we were talking about. And so I was pulling out information that they had forgotten about or they hadn't considered. And I had one client in particular who was going through a tremendous trauma of remembering childhood sexual abuse. And we were doing a lot of body work because many of her memories were pre-verbal. And not the only way, obviously, I should be the last person to say the only way, but one of the best ways to help move pre-verbal memory out of the physical body is with energy work because there's no words. You're not trying to describe something and getting caught up on your words. And her experiences were so profound that she said to me, "Please teach me to do what you're doing." And by that point, I had a bit of a rhythm in terms of how I would move around a person's body, but I hadn't really put it into any kind of concise format. So through her desire to learn this technique so she could take it back to Italy with her and do it for other clients, she wanted to become a healer as well. I I put it down on paper and I looked at all the steps that I had created and okay, well this is actually really interesting. This is something I could teach other people to do. It's more than a physical massage. It's different than energy healing, laying on of hands. It's more than what are some of the other things that are in it? Like I learned a whole lot of different techniques and then brought them all together. And so the intuitive piece is the practitioner trusting their intuition about what comes to them through their mind body while they're working on their client. There's a component of the conversation afterwards, the intuitive counseling piece, where different than when you go for a massage and then you're done your massage and you get off the table and you go, you and the practitioner sit together afterwards for up to 45 minutes and talk about all the things that came up for both of you while you were either receiving or giving the treatment. Then we work with the chakra system. We work with the auric body, the energetic body. Past lives come in. through this work, or future lives, and information about what the body wants and needs in that moment. It could be nutrition based, it could be essential oils, it could be herbs, could be go out and sit in the sunshine, like all these different messages that the body's trying to communicate to the client that the client isn't necessarily hearing. But because through the process of the intuitive energy massage, they get out of the way, and that allows the other systems to communicate with one another and with the practitioner. So it's a very, again, like a very holistic uh, approach to healing, and it generates very deep healing, and in many cases, again, permanent healing of the things that somebody's been carrying with them. And it's learnable. People can learn how to do this for others as well.
Are there maybe one or two suggestions that you can give us that can help people open their intuition? Do you have one or two easy to implement, quick, free kind of pointers for people to, because we all have intuition, most of us don't pay
Mhm.
attention to it. Are
That's
are there a
right.
couple of little golden nuggets you can share with everybody that's listening and watching?
Yes, yes, of course. I have an entire training on intuition. In fact, my healers, that's the whole 12 months is about them tapping in and learning to trust their intuition through the different modalities that we go through. The key point, the one that you just said, is we all have intuition. We are an intuitive species. We are a psychic species. It's how we can communicate with one another beyond words and gestures. Right? It's the feeling that we pick up from somebody, or that we put out to somebody else. But trusting that is not always easy if we have trust issues in the first place. Right? And that's a ninth chakra area, and another conversation if we were to go down the rabbit hole of chakras. But as we were talking about earlier on in the conversation, the tools of divination are really easy to work with. And those were things like the rune stones, the oracle cards, my deck of oracle cards being one of the examples of that. But there's so many different kinds of oracle cards out there. Tarot, crystals, um, a pendulum. These are the tools that they take you slightly outside of yourself, so that your self-doubt that might show up when it's just you coming up with the solution or the answer or the knowing and trusting it that it's valid. These tools give you that validation. So, for example, let's say that you're not sure about a love relationship. I'll use that example because my oracle cards are all about love and the heart and trusting the heart and having the heart, healing the heart. Um, you're not sure if you should be with this person. So you go to your oracle card deck, you go to the Healing Hearts oracle card deck, for example, and you pick a card. In fact, just for funsies, here I have some right here. Let's use that question, okay? So, do I pick Joe? Is Joe the right man for me? Now, the thing about these tools is that they're not going to give you the answer. They're not going to solve your problem. You have to do that. But they will give you direction. They'll tap into you're tapping into your higher self, your own knowing, and you're allowing that information to come forward because you're sitting in a moment of asking. It's the asking that allows that to happen. So do I go with Joe? I'm hoping that there's somebody out there who's wondering if they should go with Joe or not, and that's why this is coming in. And the card that I pulled is called Heart Roots. And this is actually a little tree, and these are the roots of the tree as it was growing in the ground. And the message is the first love that we experience after leaving source is that of our families. However, that dynamic functioned, we learned our love patterns from an early age. If love isn't working for you, dig deep into your roots to find your true meaning of love. Now, if this was a client sitting with me and she wanted to know if she should go with Joe, I would suggest to her that she needs to choose a different question. Because the issue isn't whether she should go and be with Joe or not. It has to do with what her expectations of love are. And is she aware of what those expectations of love are? And it's time to do some exploring around family of origin. How was love experienced as a child in order to access that bigger heart connection to the whole concept and idea of love? And when she does that, the answer to the surface question, which was, should I be with Joe, will become immediately apparent. Because she probably knows deep down inside that it's not maybe the best match, but she could make it work if she gave up a few things. And that's not actually what she wants. But she didn't know that yet.
And in the case that that client came from an abusive home in
Mhm.
her childhood, then how does that card relate to that?
Well, then there's a lot more potentially a lot more work to be done around uncovering the patterns that she's brought into her adult relationships from unhealed or wounded childhood family patterns and bringing that into awareness. As most of us, many people who for whatever one reason or another haven't had the opportunity to do some personal work on themselves may not realize that the 3-year-old or the 6-year-old or the 12-year-old is the one who's actually running the show and not the adult version of themselves because they haven't unpacked and unraveled those patterns from childhood. So all of that is to say, in answer to your question is, are there one or two easy and fairly inexpensive or free ways to tap into your intuition? Absolutely. A deck of oracle cards is a great way to do it. And mine is a whole box set. It's 65 US, so it's not the least expensive on the market. It's also not the most. But you can pick up a deck of oracle cards at a bookstore for $20, or you might find one. I don't know if you guys have free boxes on the side of the road, but we do here. You never know how it will show up for you and how it will make its way to you.
That's
Uh,
right.
yeah.
All right. Last question. Why do we incarnate?
Oh, there's a lot of reasons why we incarnate. How much time do we have left? Uh, okay, I'm gonna try to give you the Reader's Digest version of why I believe that we incarnate. Because there are experiences that the soul craves that it can only have in a corporeal form. Having said that, being human is not for the faint of heart. It takes an awful lot of preparation and work in the other realms, in the non-corporeal form. Think of it like being human is like university or even graduate school. So you can't get into university unless you've completed your studies up to grade 12 or grade 11 or whenever it is that you leave high school. And then you have to apply. You have to be um, skilled enough to get into university, to then study at university, and then to do your PhD, et cetera. So humanness, being human, is the soul's equivalent of going to university. And not every soul decides that it wants to take on that particular trajectory. So it's, like I say, not for the faint of heart. It's not an easy thing to come into human form after being in a non-corporeal form. You got to fit everything into a body. And then you have to live in that body for however many years you've decided that you're going to be here for. But we do it because there is such a uniqueness about being physical, being on this planet or whatever other planet you might be physical on. The beauty, the opportunity, the things that we get to do in the physical realm are unparalleled to anything else in the universe. And so that's why we come back here. And then we come back here for the healing. We come back here to see old friends who might be off doing other things in the non-corporeal realm, but they've decided to come back here as well. And so we connect in with our soul groups or our family groups. And we get to expand our experience being of being, really.
Mhm. From a
Mhm.
human perspective. Yeah.
From the human perspective, which is
Right.
unique anywhere in the universe.
Yeah. Yeah. Great answer. Wow. What a wonderful conversation. You are brilliant,
Mm.
eloquent, fascinating, lovely, and what a joy to get to have this wide-ranging, deep conversation with you about a plethora of things that That, and that's why this is so much fun to get to meet someone like you for me, because I have things that I wanna discuss, and then I just follow where it goes, and it always goes in interesting ways. We certainly have been given a lot to ponder with this conversation, all of us, myself included. And if we want to continue to learn more from you, how do we find you and find out more about you as a teacher and the work that you're doing?
Well, thank you, and first of all, thank you from my heart for those beautiful words. I'm very humbled, by that. Uh, People can find me in all the usual places. They can find me on LinkedIn under Megan Edge. They can find me on Facebook. I'm under Megan Edge. I'm under Megan Edge Healing. I also have a page for all of my herbalism and botanicals that I do, which is where I wildcraft salves and tinctures and herbal preparations from nature, from the natural world and the wilderness that I live in, and that's Beyond the Garden Gate Botanicals. And they can find that Facebook page, and then they can also find my website, which is beyondthegardengate.ca. Meganedge.ca is my main my main website, and through there you can get into my YouTube channel, which is full of all kinds of wonderful and amazing podcast interviews that I've done. I was gonna say just like this one, but this one's been pretty unique from my perspective as well. I've loved some of the places that we've gone to in our conversation. But you'll also find workshops, live workshops that I've done, live talks that I've done in front of large audiences and small audiences, and my radio show that I did for about 5 years, as well as my own vlog, I guess it would be called. So tons and tons of information. If you want to know more about me, or just decide whether my world is a world that you want to be a part of, going over to the YouTube channel and subscribing is one of the best ways that you can do it. And I love old-fashioned email. So you're welcome to go through the website and find the contact form and fire me off an email, and let's see where the conversation goes from there.
Okay, wonderful. All righty, everybody. Lots for you to think about here. And in the meantime, sending you lots of love from Sweet Home, Alabama, mwah, and from Victoria, Canada, too, where Megan is. We'll see you next time. To enhance your spiritual journey, click on one of the videos below, and remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share with your family and friends.